Hello, everyone. My name is Gregory Liebau. I am the Land Protection Program Manager for Sequoia Riverlands Trust, and this video is based on a presentation that was given at a seminar in Tulare County for the sake of the Tule Subbasin Multi-Benefit Land Repurposing Program. This program is funded by the California Department of Conservation and is meant to provide landowners and local communities and organizations with funding and tools to help them repurpose agricultural land in order to meet compliance with the regulations of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA, as most people refer to it. The presentation is about conservation easements. I am involved in conservation easements through my work at Sequoia Riverlands Trust and am responsible for a portfolio of easements on a variety of landscapes and have been working closely with the Multi-Benefit Land Repurposing Program, or MLRP, in order to help local landowners in the Tule Subbasin with the opportunity to explore whether or not a conservation easement in conjunction with some kind of repurposed land use is an appropriate tool for them. So I'm going to provide a slideshow which summarizes some key points about conservation easements. And in the process, I hope that you will learn more about what an easement is and whether or not it may be a useful tool for you or people that you know who farm or own land in the Tule Subbasin and wish to consider doing something different with that land that is more beneficial for a variety of purposes, whether that becomes habitat or public access or creating buffer zones around communities or installing renewable energy, which were all, among others, topics of different seminars or sessions provided at the seminar where this presentation was first given. So I believe you can now see my presentation and myself on the screen simultaneously, which is what I was going for. And I will proceed with the slideshow. So the seminar was titled the Land Repurposing Solutions Seminar, and it was hosted at the Tulare Ag Center. And the Tule MLRP is sponsored by the Pixley and Lower Tule irrigation districts in partnership with several agencies and organizations, including Sequoia Riverlands Trust. And we have been working on this grant, which is a $10 million block grant, for nearly 2 years now at this point, since the grant was awarded by the state. The funding is from the 2021 general budget plan and is a block grant, which means that it was awarded to the partners in order to develop a program essentially to meet local needs. So I will proceed with the conservation easement concept here. I hope that was enough background about MLRP and those involved. So I'd like to begin with a basic overview of conservation for those who may be unfamiliar with exactly what that entails from a technical perspective. To conserve any kind of land or anything for that matter is to protect it from certain kinds of changes. So in the case of land that is being conserved, usually some kind of potential for development is being restricted. And conservation easements can prevent a variety of types of development, essentially any type of development that could affect a piece of land, from a small parcel all the way up to entire national forest size conglomerates of parcels. And the point is typically to do something like create habitat or prevent existing habitat from being developed into something else, to protect the value of agricultural land, such as prime or statewide important soils that are being used in areas where there is a lot of access to both ground and surface water resources that provide the opportunity for long-term agricultural viability. And in the case of repurposing land, we may consider the opportunity to take currently productive agricultural land and change it into a different beneficial use. And if that beneficial use is deemed valuable enough to conserve for a longer period of time than the minimum requirement for this MLRP program, which is 10 years, then a conservation easement may be a tool to reimburse a landowner for perpetual protection of the changes that occur on the land during that transition. So as I say here in the slide, conservation is a tool which can help accomplish local Sigma goals for groundwater sustainability. An example, which will come up later in slides as well, but which is basic and to the point, is that if you were to take a piece of irrigated land and convert it into pasture and reduce the demand for groundwater use, thereby assisting with compliance with Sigma regulations, in order to sustain that over time, a conservation easement may be valuable to ensure that the restricted use of water is something that's carried on, and that would benefit the basin as a whole over time. I want to explain this map that's associated with this. The map here is of the entire Tule Subbasin, and the areas that are conserved in the subbasin, for the most part, are shown here on the map. And these are spaces that are primarily conserved for habitat values, such as the National Wildlife Refuges, the Pixley National Wildlife Refuge, and additional ecological reserves, which are owned and managed by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. In addition to this, there are actually already conservation easements on some agricultural land in the subbasin, and Sequoia Riverlands Trust are the holder of those easements. It's several hundred acres of prime farmland across the subbasin, which is an easement. And in that case, it's to maintain the agricultural viability of that land, which is different than what we're discussing here with MLRP. A conservation easement itself, just like any easement that is burdening a parcel of land, is a legal tool, and they are a document which is attached to the deed of title to any parcel that they affect. So as many of you may know, power lines from Southern California Edison or Pacific Gas and Electric, they typically have easements over the land where those lines lie, so that the ability of their workers to come in and do maintenance and repairs is possible. In some cases, lines haven't yet been constructed where easements had been purchased in the past. Many easements pertain to things like the widening of roads throughout the county, or right-of-ways for a variety of purposes, such as maintaining entryways into homes that may be on parcels that are not adjacent to public roads. So a conservation easement in that sense is no different as a legal tool. What we're doing is we're focusing on those aspects of the land and essentially removing the potential to diminish those by extracting those development rights from the property. A totally unencumbered piece of land can be utilized to do anything. You can build a skyscraper, you can dig a 1,000-foot hole. If the law does not prevent you from doing so, there is no limitation to what you can do on your land. A conservation easement is essentially a tool that is used to purchase particular rights and remove those from the deed to title. The land remains private, and in all other ways except those restrictions imposed by the conservation easement, it can continue to be used by the landowner as they see fit. So from the text here in the slide, I suppose an important point to make would be that conservation easements are perpetual. They run with the land. So in the state of California, all conservation easements that are held by qualified entities such as accredited land trusts, which Sequoia Riverlands Trust is, are perpetual, and they will not be extinguished even if property changes hands, or even if a landowner has a wish to remove that easement. There are no monetary values associated with extinguishing conservation easements, once they are in place, they are permanent. Easements are obviously negotiated. The rights of a landowner can only be removed from a parcel if the landowner voluntarily enters into that kind of an agreement. There is monetary value associated with an easement. So we have a highest and best use for any piece of land, and the value of the land is more or less correlated to whatever that use is. If it's prime agricultural land, you can do a lot of stuff to grow bountiful crops. If you're adjacent to a city that is rapidly growing, then maybe putting in a strip mall or a housing development is the highest and best use from a monetary perspective. In the case of conservation easements for the sake of the multi-benefit land repurposing program, the water benefits play a major factor. If you have an irrigated field in an area that is groundwater dependent, you are obviously going to be extracting more groundwater than someone who has reasonable surface allocations or riparian rights along an existing river or stream, such as the Tule River. And by preventing uses which require large amounts of groundwater extraction through the tool of a conservation easement, the value of the water becomes a factor in the value of the easement itself. So, as I mentioned, converting to open grazing land is a good example. Another one which is proven to be very popular as this MLRP program takes off, and we actually see some of the subbasins engaging in the program, requesting project proposals from local landowners. Creating recharge basins is, of course, another big opportunity where you can both reduce groundwater use by converting the land into a basin and then create additional groundwater through the recharge into the aquifer in those basins. If, and this is an important point, a conservation easement is to be used to protect something like a recharge basin, there would typically need to be some true multi-benefits associated with the project, such as habitat restoration. And the photo on this slide is of a recharge basin owned by the Alta Irrigation District in northern Tulare County near Highway 99. And originally this was a pit that was mined for gravel in order to build a nearby highway. It may have actually been Highway 99, I'm not certain. But Alta Irrigation has allowed this basin to essentially become wild over the decades since it was built. And it was really just serving as overflow near the end of the Alta Irrigation line on the south side near Traver. But as you can see, there's a lot of habitat benefit associated with this basin because they allowed cottonwoods and willows and other native trees and shrubs to repopulate the space. If you were to create a recharge basin and purposefully restore habitat or prevent the degradation of whatever habitat naturally reoccurs in that space, such as what happened here with this Alta Basin, then those habitat values could be something that a conservation easement would protect in perpetuity and would factor into the value of the easement as well. A grower or landowner who is engaging in any MLRP project is, of course, interested in what the benefits are to them. In many cases, we've seen landowners come forward who are interested in making their own agricultural operations more sustainable because they don't have enough water resources to continue to irrigate all of their acreage to the extent that they have in the past. And in order to continue growing as many crops as they can while remaining within their sustainable yield and not going beyond allocations that are being sorted out by the GSAs, they've chosen to voluntarily retire portions of their land. And what to do with those lands is really one of the questions that MLRP is trying to address. So the first point here about water rights is that a multi-benefit land repurposing project even without a conservation easement, mind you, is something that can be crafted so that there's flexibility involved in how the retained water rights, such as sustainable yield, or those surface rights that are associated with the property, can be used on adjacent or nearby parcels in order to continue sustainable farming. If you have a conservation easement rolled into that, the value, which is what the second point is relating to here, is something that can be a monetary return to the landowner. And this would come in the form of a one-time payment at the time that a conservation easement is closed and recorded with the county, in this case, Tulare County, for the Tule Subbasin. So, as stated there in the easement value section in particular, landowners willing to limit future uses of their land by preventing intensive development and excessive groundwater pumping can be reimbursed a significant portion of their land value from the sale of a conservation easement. So, in a nutshell, if you wish to engage with the MLRP process and you come up with a repurposing plan for your property that creates true multi-beneficial values, such as habitat or public access, which is something that we really don't talk about in this discussion, but is a potential use, then you can justify, or we, as an entity that holds conservation easements, can justify the purchase of that conservation easement in order to protect those values into the future. Once again, before I move forward, this photo is from 2023 of a property near Corcoran, and it's actually just inside of the Tule Subbasin, I believe. There is a conservation easement on it because it has never been manipulated with discs or any other kind of agricultural implements. It's grazing land, and it still retains many of its natural features. It flooded from the Tule River during March and April of 2023, and these are the flood waters that entered that property. So the proximity of a parcel to a natural waterway, such as the Tule River or Deer Creek, could influence the value of a potential easement to increase and maintain the viability of floodplains in order to alleviate damage that's caused on other parcels elsewhere throughout the subbasin during significant flooding events, such as those we experienced in 2023. The spirit of the multi-benefit land repurposing program is one of community, and farmers and ranchers are a central part of the economic model and the local communities and the culture of the San Joaquin Valley. So when we think about how to create benefits across the community, and in particular regarding the implementation of SGMA, farmers and ranchers are a central component. And the program is meant to reimburse them for the changes that are inevitably happening across the landscape due to SGMA. But other stakeholders, such as disadvantaged communities, tribal groups, organizations that are passionate about certain things, such as outdoor activities and recreation or environmental restoration, can also benefit from these programs because, or this program in particular, because of the flexibility inherent in what it means to create a multi-beneficial project. So if you have the opportunity to take a part or all of your land and repurpose it into something such as renewable energy, then the electricity that's going to be generated on the solar panels or from the wind machines is something that's going to be beneficial for other communities throughout the state. If you create a recharge basin that you feel comfortable getting the minimal amount of liability insurance necessary to allow local community members to come be able to walk around, such as we see over in Bravo Lake and Wood Lake, then you create a community benefit by giving some open space access for people to exercise and get outdoors. if you create or restore a floodplain by removing crops in an area next to a previously encroached upon riparian corridor, such as the Tule River, then you create flood benefits, which drastically reduce the impacts of flooding on downstream communities. And these are all examples of ways that farmers and ranchers, as the kind of central players in this process of implementing SGMA, can benefit their neighbors in the San Joaquin Valley and in the Tule Subbasin in particular. Conservation takes all that to a next step by suggesting that the changes that occur on that repurposed land will be maintained in perpetuity. And that, to our organization, Sequoia Riverlands Trust, and other conservation groups working in the San Joaquin Valley, some of which are active partners on the Tule Subbasin MLRP, such as the Tule Land and Water Conservation Trust, the Nature Conservancy, and California Audubon, are all invested in helping landowners to deal with the changes and implications of SGMA and some of the inevitable economic stress that is going to be created by the lowering of groundwater pumping over time by producing results via mechanisms such as this multi-benefit land repurposing program. And conservation easements are an added layer of protection, but also an added layer of financial incentive for landowners to participate in these programs if they're willing to take that step and commit to their land being conserved in perpetuity for these purposes. This photo is from the Quia Oaks Preserve, which is owned and managed by Sequoia Riverlands Trust. And this is a recharge area on the north side of the preserve. In 2014, this, which is part of a kind of triangular parcel that covers about 20 acres, had previously been a stone fruit orchard, and it was stripped and then sold to the trust and restored with relatively moderate tools at our disposal. There was not a lot of tree planting involved. These cottonwoods that you see in the foreground on the left side of the screen are actually a good 25-30 feet tall, and those reoccurred naturally after the first recharge event. Deep Creek runs along the border of the preserve in this parcel, and the Quia Delta Water Conservation District uses it to pump excess water into the preserve in this parcel in particular. And it is more or less renaturalized itself just because of all the seeds and implications of wildlife moving through the space over time. And in just a decade, it looks like a very wild, and it's also a very useful and critical bit of infrastructure for groundwater recharge. If that had not been owned by the trust, it would be a valuable piece of land to consider conserving in perpetuity with a conservation easement. And so that's why I show that as by way of example. In addition to helping landowners and the potential to help different stakeholders within the local communities, of course, the primary goal, as stated multiple times throughout this presentation, is to assist with the implementation of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And the GSAs, and your GSA in particular, are very interested in making sure that the changes that occur on your land can help to benefit the implementation of their groundwater sustainability plans. So, to reiterate the point again, this program, MLRP, the Multi-Benefit Land Repurposing Program, is across the entire Tule Subbasin. Anyone who owns land in this subbasin can apply to be part of this program. Currently, there is a process of seeking applications. So although time may run out, there's probably going to be further opportunities in the future. And of course, we all know that SGMA is going to take until at least 2040 to fully implement. So the chance to repurpose land for beneficial uses will remain a central component of Sigma implementation in the long term, whether or not the multi-benefit land repurposing program, as we see it today in this first iteration provided to us by the state via this block grant, is available. So I hope that this presentation has helped to kind of explain and illuminate some of the opportunities where conservation, and in particular perpetual conservation through the creation of easements, can help to provide an additional incentive and also some sense of permanence to the changes that are occurring, which are beneficial and can help to achieve the goals that all of us are looking forward to, which is to maintain as much productive agriculture in this region as possible and support our communities with those changes that may eventually be inevitable. So I wanted to go back to a point that I made earlier in the presentation, which is that there are also other conservation easements that are strictly designed to protect continued agricultural use. And there isn't any reason that a conservation easement for the sake of multi-beneficial land uses on ground that is having reduced water demand can't be mixed with easements or just other sorts of land uses that continue to require groundwater. And I wanted to make that clear and included this slide to make the point that one landowner can do all of these things at once. Depending on the size of your farm, you may feel that the flexibility is more or less easy for you to accomplish. But if you have enough land to where you feel that these mixed uses, such as creating recharge basins or creating some habitat, if you have a property next to an existing river or stream, for example, are conducive to continuing to farm the rest of your land, then you may end up with an easement to protect habitat along the river corridor, while at the same time, you might end up with an easement through a different program to protect the important agricultural productivity on the rest of your land. And that goes to the point of the last sentence here, which is that every easement is unique and it's crafted for resilient and flexible future use of the land. And these documents can be as detailed or as simplistic as the parties involved wish them to be. You can limit land uses down to very detailed specificity, such as I do or I do not want to build a house in this exact spot, and I want to continue farming these exact acres. Or you may say that all of a particular right, such as the ability to pump groundwater, is going to be limited across an entire parcel or only in a specific portion of a parcel. And all of that is inherent to the process. And we at Sequoia Riverlands Trust and other conservation groups that are qualified to hold conservation easements are well versed in negotiating the terms of easements and understanding and coming up with the values of those easements based on the rights that are going to be taken away from the land in order to sustain those values. So feel free to reach out. I've provided 2 links in this slide, which you're welcome to pause on. And those include Land Conservation Basics from the Land Trust Alliance and Conservation Easement Basics from the California Council of Land Trusts. Sequoia Riverlands Trust, we have a website, sequoiariverlands.org, and the Tule MLRP for the Tule Subbasin also has a website where many resources can be found. And all you would have to type in is Tule MLRP on your search bar on the internet, and you'll be able to find that with ease. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it, and I hope that your time spent listening was not wasted, and that Sigma and the MLRP process and any other programs that you come across go smoothly for you. Thank you.